The buttons and indicators on the Pfaff Quilt Expression 720 are there because these are the ones I use the most. So I just want to give you a quick little overview of the buttons that are right at your fingertips. The ones that you'll use the most probably are going to be where you can lift and lower the presser foot with the buttons. Notice there's not a lifter in the back, but you can step on the foot control and the machine will start to sew. So you don't actually have to push them to start sewing. But there's a time where you might want to lift it up in the middle of what you're working with. You can press the presser foot up button and you can press it again. If you heard a little extra click, you heard the feed dogs actually lowering when it went to its extra high lift. That's a lot of lift in there. There's a lot of room. If you have a very thick bag or seam or thickness you got to get in there just to get started, push this 2 times to raise the foot all the way up. Same thing, you can step on the foot control and the foot will return to the fabric. Or you can go ahead and push the foot down button. So if it's at its normal height, which it is, the down button can also be used 2 ways. Push it down to touch the fabric and see that you're where you're supposed to be. Now with me, I'm not usually always spot on, so if I push that foot down arrow button 1 more time, it pops up just enough that I can move the fabric left or right and get it exactly where I wanted to start. So that is a great feature. You just need to know you can push them 1 extra time and get an extra high or a little pop-up if it's touching the fabric. Next, let's go ahead and go down here, the reverse button. That's pretty obvious. But keep in mind, if you touch it while you're not sewing, this light turns on. That means you're going backwards forever until you touch the reverse button and unlight that light. So if you see the light, you're going backwards, whether you want to or not. But it does allow you to have backward sewing, locking stitches with 2 hands on your fabric. That is the benefit. If you're actually touching it when you're sewing, just a quick touch and hold, you'll go back until you release it. That's probably what most people are used to using. Just know you need to touch it while the machine is in motion to get that kind of quick on and quick off way of locking a seam. All right, next up, talking about locking a seam, what if we didn't need a lot of stitches? We have what is called an immediate tie-off. That's this button here with the single and 3 triple stitches right below it. When I touch it, you'll see a little indicator of that function show on the screen. And it's just going to take a quick 1 stitch forward, 1 stitch back, couple locks, and it locks, and then it quits. That means that it's just like 1 stitch worth of extra stitches. You can use the thread snips, which you've probably found, but once again, that is where they are. You can actually use the thread snips 2 different ways. So when I touched it when I was stopping, it just cut the thread and lifted the foot. But do you know that if you're sewing along and you want that immediate tie-off and a cut, if you want to go ahead and touch the thread snips while you're sewing, that's exactly what you'll get. You'll get an immediate tie-off and the scissors all tied together. But you have to touch it while the machine is in motion. Nifty. Love that feature too, but people forget that that's an option. Next, let's just talk about needle down. So let's say your machine is stopping with the needle up. When you do select for the needle down, the foot hovers. So you can easily turn a corner, do applique, add or finesse fabric. Maybe you're adding in another layer. The foot is up for you, and then you can just continue to stitch. Love that feature with the needle up down. Again, as soon as you use the thread snips, cuts the thread, brings the needle up, and lifts the foot up. What about this one? This one's a go button, but before we touch go and it just races away at full speed, let's talk about this button. This is the speed adjustment. Now you notice there's a little corner arrow in the bottom right part of the button, and that means that if you hold that button, you're going to get a pop-up screen. If I just touch it, it puts the machine to half speed. So now when I go push the button and it's sewing without me touching the foot control, that's the difference. It's an on and off for the machine. So if you forget your foot control, no problem. You can still sew with this machine, probably reducing the speed halfway. But if you touch and hold that speed control, you will get an entire screen. With this, you can actually have 5 different levels of speed. and you can control which one works best for you. Touch OK, and now the indicator will kind of give you a little single dash. I put it all the way slow. So let's see how slow the machine will sew. This is going to be max speed, great for sewing with youngsters, or if you're just taking your time using this button and you don't want to be racing away. So once again, touch those thread snips, lock it off, and it will finish. I'm not doing anything other than just standing here. It locks it, cuts it, lifts the foot, and you're ready to have a secure last stitch as we sew. Now, I've saved this last one here, which is called a stitch restart. You're probably not going to notice this when you're just doing a straight stitch. Oh, by the way, I am going to bring this back to full speed just by touching the speed control. That all disappeared. Let's pick a decorative stitch, something that we can see a start and finish to this stitch. Maybe jump over to our scallopy type stitches. I'll do a quick one. This is just a straight stitch. So you can use this in two ways. Number one, now let's just say you're sewing a row of this. Maybe you're doing your stitch book and learning what all the great stitches you have in your machine. So here are some of the stitches I've used from the Pfaff machine on our Pfaff Stitching Cosmos online course, which you can check out with links below this YouTube video. You can actually watch 10 videos for free. That's kind of a fun little course you can test out for yourself. But we get into all these little details and specifics, and you watch me make every single one of these blocks. But here's one thing I do use. So I'm sewing along, and I want to stop at the end of this pattern. I don't want to stop in the middle. So while I'm sewing, I'm going to touch the stitch restart button, and it will finish the stitch. Notice that it went all the way to the end of the scallop and finished. I didn't get half of a scallop, and I didn't have to guess where that was. Okay, so here's my perfect ending to that scallop. But here's another use for it. Let's just say that I'm sewing along. I'm going to get through 1.5 scallops right now, and I realized that was not where I wanted to start. If I need to restart this stitch, I can find myself putting the stitch back to the beginning by pushing this while I'm not sewing. So before I pushed it while I was sewing and it finished the stitch, now when I push it, watch, there's a little green plus that will pop back to the beginning of the stitch. Now it's back to the beginning, and I will restart by its name, the stitch from the beginning. So those buttons are awesome. Again, the more you get to comfortable using them, the more you'll realize why Pfaff put those right on the front of the machine. Here we go. We'll lock off that little cute little decorative stitch and cut it and pull it out. All right, so I hope you'll take some time to check out and sew out all your decorative stitches in this machine. Learn how to make a stitch book. We have videos on that as well.